Hey everyone, Ashton here, and welcome back to Precision Horology. Today we're going to go through the servicing and repair or restoration of a pretty iconic watch, and that's the Rolex Oyster Perpetual date. Now this is a beautiful little 36mm Rolex, classic design, 1970s, and what we're interested in, particularly when it comes to going through this service, is the movement itself. So the movement is the Rolex 1570 movement. It's one of the classic 1500 series movements. It has no hacking seconds or balance stop, and it has no quick date. But it's such a beautiful, fantastic movement. In fact, it's one of my favorite movements to work on. It was used in a whole bunch of Rolex watches from the 1970s, I believe, into the 80s as well. But it's just such a fantastic watch, and it's a joy to service, a joy to restore, and I really just love working on them. So let's get down to business and see what this watch needs. So one of the big common wear points for vintage Rolex watches is the oscillating weight axle. It's this piece, this steel piece that you can see here, and it's riveted on to the oscillating weight. And over time, these wear out and they need replacing. They go into two jeweled bearings and are held in with a spring clip. And what happens is the side-to-side play becomes too much on these. And we can actually see that the side-to-side play, it's become too much on this one. Now, what's going to happen if we leave it is it's going to leave markings inside the case back here, and it's also going to leave markings on the movement here. It's going to start dragging because the play is too much. So this came in at a good time because we can replace that. We can put a new oscillating weight axle in there, and no more damage will happen. Well, actually, thankfully, we've got away with no damage here, so we can completely avoid damage. So you can see there the up and down play. So we've got the automatic block off. Now, we wouldn't normally put our fingers on the movement, but this movement's dirty, so we can use our finger with the finger caught on to rest. And we can see that when we move through our reversing wheels here, it's really gummed up. It's not moving nice and free, so it's really gummed up with old lubricants. That should be moving much freer and not getting jammed like that. So getting that serviced will make a huge difference. So we'll have actually functional automatic winding, so it'll be doing its job correctly. You might have felt this on your watch. You might notice that when you wind it manually, even though this is the automatic section, power is still coming through here, and it feels sluggish to wind. Feels a little more difficult than it used to. That's an indication that this automatic section is gummed up and the watch needs servicing. So if we take a look at the numbers on the timing machine, we can see it's actually not running in a terrible condition. The amplitude's pretty healthy. Beat error can be brought down, but it's actually within tolerance still at this point. And the rate is 23 seconds a day loss. So that definitely needs adjusting. But the watch certainly isn't in terrible condition. If we put it into the crown down position, we can see that we don't have a huge jump in timekeeping. We don't go from -20 to +40 or anything like that. So the watch appears to be in pretty good condition as far as that goes. But obviously there are areas of concern that we do need to address. So now we have our dial and hands removed. We can go ahead and we can start removing the movement components. One thing I've noticed is it's quite difficult to set the time. So we're going to need to do something about the tightness on that cannon pinion. Perhaps it's just a lubrication issue. Perhaps it's more. But we'll get there when we get there and see what we need to do. So we can remove the very top bridge first that controls the calendar. Like so. And we can drop the calendar disc out as well. So with the calendar wheel removed, we can see some signs of lubricant and rubbing underneath there. So it's possible that that wheel doesn't actually have enough end shake. It needs to have a lot of free up and down play so that it doesn't rub, because what will happen is it's in constant engagement off the hour wheel here so that the date is able to advance. And if that wheel's in constant engagement and it's rubbing like that, we're going to have a loss of amplitude, a loss of power, which is going to lead to a loss in accuracy and also a loss in how long the watch can run for. So we'll have a look and see what's going on there, but we'll have to clean it first, clean it up and remove a few other components before we can check. So we'll go ahead now and we'll remove the rest of the dial side of the watch. So we have the calendar work removed at this point. All that we have left is our winding and setting work. Now, we aren't going to remove our winding and setting work yet because we actually need to turn the watch over and we need to let the power down before we can work on it. And if we remove the winding and setting work, we won't be able to let the power down safely. Just discovered another problem with the movement too. The mainspring, when being wound around, is slipping too much. I can hear it actually, sometimes it's referred to as a clunker, where it clunks around and slips too much. And that's actually going to mess with the power reserve and mess with the duration of run. So if you listen carefully, we might be able to hear it happen. Not sure if that picked that up, but that's the spring releasing too much. So let's go ahead and let down the power so that we can go through the rest of the movement. So we can go ahead and start removing the dial side components, being very careful with the delicate brass components. Now this has told me something interesting that I wasn't sure was going to be the case or not, but we've actually got a bushing that's already been installed in the main plate here. This was a common wear point on vintage watches. As you might know, if you've seen my Tudor home plate bushing video, you can see that I custom made a brass bushing. This is a common wear point on Rolexes, so Rolex have actually developed a bushing that a beryllium bronze bushing that you can purchase that has been made to fit in the top and bottom plates. So it looks like this watch has already had that upgrade done, so we won't need to worry about rebushing the movement. And it's still the factory hole in the dial side. Those do wear less often though, so we'll have a look at that when we get to it. Now there are tools designed to remove these over fourth wheels. I don't love them personally. I find that they have a tendency to leave a few marks. So how I like to do it, because this wheel here is mounted on top of another pivot via friction, so it needs to be removed. So I prefer to actually turn the wheel free like so. Now we have to do this with the escapement in place, so that it blocks. But I prefer to just turn the wheel with a plastic peg via the spokes, and then we can safely remove it without leaving any marks underneath. With our crown wheel removed, we notice a little bit of rust. It looks like rust, but I think it could just be old lubricant there. That definitely needs refreshing. So we have our balance and pallets removed, so our gear train is free now. And we want to check our end shakes, just to make sure that we don't have too much, that everything's free and working well. It's not the best time to check end shakes because we have old lubricant and things that could be affecting it, but it's good to just check throughout the whole process just to make sure that everything's working smoothly. So we can now go ahead and remove our train wheel bridge and our barrel bridge. So with our bridges removed, we expose our gear train. We can see we have, well, our winding and sliding pinion over here, which will engage with our crown wheel, and then in turn engage with our ratchet wheel, which will turn the mainspring inside our barrel here. We then have our center wheel, which goes down to our third wheel, which goes down to our fourth wheel, which goes down to our escape wheel there. So we're going to remove all these wheels at this time, and we're going to examine their pivots just to make sure that their pivots are in tip-top condition. And if they're not, we're going to look at burnishing them to make sure that they're perfectly polished to reduce any friction that they might come across when they're damaged like that. So before we send a watch through the cleaning machine, it's important that we use a sharpened stick of pegwood like this, just to clean out all the bearing surfaces like so, and all the jewel holes, because what this does when we do this is it really just cleans the old lubricant out and makes sure that the bearing surface that goes in with the jewels is perfectly clean with everything removed, so that we get the best amplitude possible. So at this point, we're going to remove the mainspring from the barrel. We like to do it in a nice, slow, controlled manner. Even though we'll replace the mainspring, it's good not to let the mainspring kind of whip out of the barrel, because it can cause damage to the walls of the barrel. Now, the reason usually we replace mainsprings is we can see here it's not sitting flat. We can see that it's sitting up. Now, what will happen is this will start to affect amplitude. It'll also cut grooves on the inside of the barrel. So when we are servicing a watch like this, we usually always install a new mainspring, because we can see here it's just absolutely not flat. So with our movement now completely stripped out, we've got it in our cleaning baskets ready to go through the cleaning machine. So we group small delicate components like screws and springs together into a smaller mesh basket. We group our train wheels together and delicate components also into a small mesh basket. And then everything else we split up between the rest of the baskets. The only thing we leave in place, is the balance, which is assembled on its balance cock so that it doesn't get damaged. And we also leave our setting lever and setting lever screw in place. But we can see that everything else has been completely stripped out from the movement. So at this point, we put the movement into the cleaning machine, and it goes through a 4-stage cleaning cycle and then a heating cycle, so that we remove all the old dirt and lubricants. So the movement is clean, and it's come out of the cleaning machine, and we have it ready to go into our movement tray. So what we need to do at this point, as we're assembling, is we need to use our Epilam coating on our various components. Epilam is a surface treatment that we use. It's a clear liquid, evaporates very quickly, and it helps lubricant stay in place so that it doesn't spread. So these are the components that we use Epilem on. We use it on our escape wheel and the pallet stones only of our pallet fork. This helps the escapement lubrication stay in place, not go over on top of the teeth, underneath, or on top of the pallet stones as well. We also use it on our reversing wheels. We want the pivots of our reversing wheels to have lubricant on them to prevent wear, but we do not want to lubricate the clicks, these small clicks in here that stop the reversing wheels from unwinding the watch. Very important that we don't get lubricant spreading onto these clicks, as that will really jam up the winding and gum it up and stop it winding efficiently. So we're going to Epilem those parts. We're going to install our new mainspring in our barrel, and then we'll be ready to go ahead with assembly. So we have our barrel that's been lubricated, and we're going to install our mainspring now. So we have a Swiss-made General Resort mainspring that we're going to be installing. As I said, the barrel has been pre-lubricated, and we're going to install our mainspring into our barrel here, like so. A plastic peg to push it down, and our mainspring is installed. So at this stage, what we've done is we've installed our balance jewels into the balance, and we can check our balance end shake. And we also want to check that our balance spring is flat, parallel with our balance and the bridges. And we also want to check that it's concentric and centered as well. So our balance spring, if it needs any adjustments, this is the point that we would make them, because there's nothing on the watch, so we can see exactly where the balance spring needs attention. So the next thing we'll do is we'll install our barrel and center wheel. Now the mainspring, as we talked about, is in the barrel, but before we install it, we just need to do a few checks to make sure that we have good end shake and good side shake. These are usually checks that are done with feel. We just hold the barrel like so, and we just check to make sure that we have freedom all the way around in different positions. If we don't have freedom, the watch is going to jam up, and we're going to have amplitude and power loss problems. So we checked our pivots as well of our wheels, and they look to be in good condition. So we can lubricate. Our pivots. That pivot will be lubricated from the back. And install our bridge. So we have our barrel bridge installed. And again, we can check the end shake between the plates just by moving our barrel bridge up and down. And we like to test it in a few different positions. Now I said we were going to install the center wheel. I got mixed up. Some barrel bridges have center wheel jewels, but this is actually throughout the, or attached to the gear train bridge. Whereas a lot of times the barrel bridge will have the jewel for the center wheel. So what we can do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to put our gear train in place. So we've got the gear train in place. With that in place, we can go ahead and fit our gear train bridge. We've already lubricated the certain components, like our jewels that have shock protection. They need to be lubricated ahead of time. pivots are all in place. So we can fit our bridge now, and then we can fit our winding and setting work. So we have the movement turned over so that we can fit all our winding and setting work. The one thing we have to do before that is we have to lubricate our center wheel and our third wheel because our winding and setting work will actually hide that. So we're going to lubricate that and fit the winding and setting work now. And we'll lubricate the winding and setting work as we go. So we have our winding and setting work installed, and we have our winding work on the train side installed too. So we've put some power through the train, and now we have the escapement in place. The power is being held and blocked, so we can go ahead and we can lubricate. So with our movement side completely assembled, and our winding and hand setting work assembled, we can go ahead and install our calendar work. But before we install our calendar work, we want to put our calendar wheel on and double check our end shake on that wheel to make sure that we have freedom that we spoke about earlier. So our calendar wheel's installed, and if you notice, when we go to move it around, it's very tight. We don't have end shake there, we don't have freedom. So we actually need to adjust that wheel and increase the end shake by pushing the post out from the other side. So to adjust our end shake, I should say, we mount the movement up in the Horrier tool. Now these adjustments are okay to make afterward, after cleaning it after service, because we don't have to remove any bridges or anything like that. We just have to remove the balance and balance cock, which is not a problem. So what we do is we mount it up in the Horrier tool like so, and then we can make a small adjustment just to push that post out so that we can get our end shake to be the correct amount. So we now have all of our date work or setting and calendar work completed. We have a good end shake on our wheel here, and also I've loosened up that cannon pinion because it was too tight when it came in. So I've loosened up that cannon pinion, and we have a good date change. So we can now install our date wheel, and we can also have a look at some of our timing checks. So here we have our completed movement, serviced and finished. So at this point, we're able to put the dial and hands back on the watch, case the watch up, and then have it go through its final testing phase before it's ready to go back to the customer. Our completed Rolex Oyster Perpetual date. So the service of our vintage Rolex is now complete. So again, we'll go through those final testing results. We can see that we put a new acrylic crystal into the watch. And the other thing we had to do was we changed out that oscillating weight axle that we spoke about earlier. So the new oscillating weight axle has been put in, so we have the correct end shake, and we don't have any danger of it rubbing on the movement or on the case back either. I also had to make a few adjustments when it came to the reversing wheels and automatic work. So thanks again for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. If you liked the video, please subscribe. Let your friends know about the channel, and you can also follow us on Instagram @Precision Horology and check out my website too. So thanks again, and see you next time.